Well, hey there, I'm Dr. Tom Ulrich, and I like to talk about leadership in engineering. Did you know that a lot of engineers simply don't want to be managers? Did you know that if you take an engineer and promote him or her into management, you've really increased the probability that they're not going to be at your organization a year from today? Now, if you talk to just about any engineer and ask them that question, the answer you're going to get is, well, yeah. But if you talk to your typical business person, the answer is going to be sort of shock and bewilderment. Why not? So, this is a question I got interested in some of my original research. And what I did is I ended up publishing 3 papers out of this thing. And for the first paper, I did an experiment where I was asking engineers who recently accepted promotions into leadership, why'd you do it? The questions I asked them, I based on a careful literature review and really thought I asked questions that would get to the bottom of it. And I think they did. And about a year later, I did another research project. And what I did is I thought, I should talk to principal engineers, really good engineers who did the opposite. They were offered a promotion and said no. And so what I did is I decided I would ask them the same questions that I asked the other set. So I asked the one set, basically, why'd you do it? And I asked them specific questions. And then I asked these people who turned down promotions, why didn't you do it? And I asked them the exact same questions. And going into the study, what I thought I would find is very different answers. Now, all the questions I asked had to do with a concept called motivation to lead. And what I was thinking is I would find very different motivations to lead. And sort of like, well, with the people who said yes, we'd see a lot of motivation to lead. And with the people who said no, we wouldn't see very much. Now, my study was qualitative, so I wasn't getting numbers. I wasn't doing like agree somewhat, agree very much. I was just talking and I was asking questions, trying to understand how they think about being a leader. And the really surprising thing is that the group who said, yes, I'll be a manager, and the group who said, no, thanks, I have no interest in being a manager, they gave me the same answers. They said the same things. So we had the engineers who said, yes, I'll become a leader, and it's because of X, Y, and Z. And then we had the other group that says, not interested in being a manager because of X, Y, and Z. The exact reason that led some of them to say yes and some of them to say no was the same. So the third paper I did, it was a theory piece. So those first 2 were empirical studies. This last one was a theory piece. And I was trying to get my head around how could this be? And so what I did for the paper is I revisited the data for both and thought about it. And I proposed what I call my theory of influence. And so the idea goes like this. In all cases, these principal engineers who were pillars of the organization, but not interested in being managers, they were interested in exerting influence on the organization. And the ones who accepted managerial roles were interested in exerting influence in the organization. And what I think it came down to was the perception of what's the best way to influence the organization. And what I think it is simply this. Managers who have had role models who were effective engineering managers tend to see being a manager as the best way to influence the organization. So if you're an engineer and you've had a manager that really helped you at some level, you're going to want to be a manager. But if you've had the managers who are like in the Dilbert cartoon strip, you're going to take the opposite. You're going to, why would I want to be one of those? And it's more so if at the same time they had a mentor who was an excellent engineer who was not a manager. See, if the role model is the people really helping this organization are individual contributors. That's what these top performers are going to want to do. So a couple key takeaways. The first one is, a lot of organizations, I've seen this over and over and over, they will tolerate bad managers. The team will be churning and it's very, very clear that the team is unhappy with this manager. And see, what happens is when you leave the wrong person in management too long, what happens is you're training all those young engineers to think poorly of management. So it's like when you don't take action on a bad engineering manager, that's the gift that won't stop giving, because not only does it prevent your organization from achieving the success it could have, it's pretty much guaranteeing that the people who ought to be your leader will say no thank you when asked. Now, the other thing is, it's really important to think about who your individual contributor influencers are. Now, especially when I was at Parker Aerospace, there were two principal engineers who had just colossally bad attitudes, and everybody knew it. They were pretty smart engineers, but colossally bad attitudes. And what they were doing is they were influencing the organization, and coupled with that, there were some really bad engineering managers, but they weren't being the kind of role model. And so not only were they encouraging the younger engineers to not go into management, they were modeling for them that what you do instead is you remain an individual contributor and you disrupt the organization with your bad attitude. So here's the bottom line. You really don't want to tolerate bad engineering managers. That is the gift that just won't stop giving. Hey, I'm Dr. Tom Ulrich. Thanks for listening. If you like more videos, they're down here, tomulrichconsulting.com. On YouTube, you can simply search on Dr. Tom Ulrich. And hey, if you don't mind, could you subscribe? Could you give me a like? That would be amazing. At any rate, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.